Picture a building designed from the ground up to make you feel like you'd rather die than be there. Not metaphorically, that was the actual goal. The actual stated, debated, voted on in Parliament goal. Make the place bad enough that anyone who could possibly survive outside its walls would choose to do so no matter what it cost them. Starvation outside, freezing in a ditch outside, watching your children cry from hunger outside, all of it preferable to going inside. Now fill that building with 400 human beings who had no choice. Add a diet deliberately calculated to sustain life while removing every pleasure attached to it. Add a uniform that erases your name, your history, your face. Add labour so monotonous and physically destructive that your hands crack and bleed before the second week is done. Add the particular cruelty of hearing your children on the other side of a wall you're not permitted to cross. And then, once a week, add soup. The kind of soup made from bones, not good bones, not butcher's bones with scraps of meat still clinging to them. Bones that have already been used for something else. Bones that have been boiled once for glue, sometimes twice. Bones from animals that weren't quite fit for anything else. Bones with a smell to them that you learn to identify before the cook even starts the fire. A smell that means, this is Tuesday. And Tuesday means you'll eat, but you'll wish you hadn't. That's a Yorkshire workhouse in the 1840s. Cold stone floors. A master who wears a frock coat and keeps careful accounts. A matron who has the face of someone who was once kind and then decided it didn't pay. 400 men, women and children, organised by sex and age into separate wards. They are not permitted to leave without permission. A world 3 stories high and maybe 80 yards across, surrounded by a stone wall the height of a man standing on another man's shoulders. A place where you could lose everything in a morning and gain nothing back for years. And we're going there tonight, not as visitors, not as social reformers taking notes, not as the men from the Poor Law Commission with their clipboards and their dietary tables and their theories about moral improvement through disciplined suffering. We're living it. One boy, one winter. Everything he would have seen and smelled and worked and eaten and survived and barely survived. I make these history stories and I genuinely don't know if you listen to them to sleep or if you're just the kind of person who finds institutional cruelty of the 1840s soothing background noise. Honestly, after doing this long enough, I've stopped judging. You're here. I'm here. Get comfortable. Pull your blanket up. Here we go. The first thing that happens is they take your name away. Not all at once. Not cruelly. Not with any particular malice. Just efficiently. Systematically. The way you'd sort wool at a mill or catalogue entries in a ledger. You are Thomas Hartley. You are 15 years old. You were born in the village of Marsden, 7 miles west of Huddersfield, in the West Riding of Yorkshire, in the year 1831. Your father was a cloth finisher named William Hartley, and he died of typhus fever in October of last year, and the debt he left behind, 3 months of unpaid rent to a landlord who waited exactly 4 weeks before acting on it, was enough to bring you, your mother, your sister Agnes, who is 12, and your sister Mary, who is 8, to stand at the gate of the Huddersfield Union Workhouse on a Thursday morning in February 1846, with everything you own tied up in a cloth. The cloth contains 1 spare shirt, a pair of woolen stockings your mother knitted 2 winters ago and keeps mended, a small Bible with your grandmother's name written inside the cover in faded brown ink, a horn comb with 2 teeth missing, and a piece of waxed paper folded around the last of the bread your mother made the day before, which she divided into 4 equal pieces this morning, while you all stood in the road outside the gate, eating it standing up in the cold. She made you eat it slowly. She knew. The porter at the gate is a compact man with a red face, and an air of having performed this particular task so many times that it registers as something between boredom and irritation. He looks at you and your mother and your sisters the way a man looks at a delivery of coal. Necessary, slightly inconvenient, to be processed. Names, he says. Your mother tells him. He writes them down in a ledger without looking up. Reason for admission. My husband died. We have no income and no shelter. He writes that down too. Any infectious illness in the party? No. You'll be examined by the medical officer before classification. Follow me. He says follow me the way he'd say it to a cart horse. You follow. The gate closes behind you. It doesn't slam, doesn't bang with any dramatic finality. It simply closes. An ordinary wooden gate with iron fittings. It clicks shut, and that's that. You don't know yet that it will be 7 months before you walk back through it. The entrance yard is paved with stone flags, uneven, darkened with rain and age. The workhouse itself fills your entire field of vision. A long grey 3-story building in a style that manages to look simultaneously institutional and almost ecclesiastical. The way things designed to be permanent tend to look. There are no ornaments, no softening details, just stone and brick and windows, many windows, small and uniform like the building is watching you arrive from dozens of eyes. It smells, not violently, not the way a tannery smells, or a cesspit, or a knacker's yard. It's subtler than that. A background smell that you'll only notice fully for the first few days, because after that your nose will simply stop registering it, the way it stops registering the smell of your own house. It smells of boiled oatmeal, wet wool, carbolic soap applied to stone floors and old wood. Beneath that, something animal and faintly sour, like the residue of a cooking pot that hasn't quite been cleaned. Below even that, the specific damp of a building that was built to house too many people in too small a space. A smell that is human and old and tired, and under all of it, something else. You don't know what it is yet. You'll learn. The medical examination is brief and humiliating in a way you can't quite articulate afterwards. A thin man with wire spectacles presses his hands against your ribs, looks at your throat, examines your hair for lice, asks you to turn around. He does this with the dispassion of a man checking machinery. He writes something in a book. Fit for ordinary labour, he says. Then he looks at your mother. The children, he says. They're with me, your mother says. She says it with a flatness in her voice that you've never heard before. A flatness that means she already knows what he's going to say. That she's been preparing for this since she walked through the gate. Maybe since the morning she made the bread and divided it into 4 pieces. Regulations require separation by classification, the medical officer says. He doesn't say it unkindly, that's almost worse. Women with children under 7 in one ward, girls above 7 and under 13 in the girls' ward, boys above 13 in the able-bodied men's ward. A pause. Your mother's hand finds your arm, squeezes it once, very hard, then lets go. Agnes goes with the girls, she says. Her voice is steady, completely steady. Thomas stays with the boys above 13, the man says. He'll be classified with the able-bodied men. A silence. Mary, who is 8 and has not fully understood what any of this means until this exact moment, starts to cry. Your mother kneels down to her level, pulls her close, says something quiet against the top of her head that you can't hear. Agnes stands very still with her arms straight at her sides and her jaw tight, the way she stands when she doesn't want to cry and is winning. You stand with your bundle and your Bible and your spare shirt, and you watch your family come apart like something pulled too hard at its seams, and then the porter is steering you away from them down a corridor that smells of that same underlying smell you couldn't identify before. And this time you can. It's the smell of too little food cooking for too long. The able-bodied men's ward is a long, narrow room on the second floor with 16 beds arranged in 2 rows of 8 against opposite walls. The beds are wooden framed, with a mattress that contains something. Straw, you think, though it's been compressed by years of use into something approaching the consistency of thin board. Each bed has 1 blanket, grey wool, washed recently enough that it smells of carbolic rather than bodies, but the grey itself is so deep and institutional and absolute that it looks like the colour of abandonment. There are 8 other men in the ward when they bring you in. Most are older than you. One, near the window, is perhaps 40, with the broad hands of a mill worker and a cough that you'll hear every night for the next 7 months. 2 are very old, in their 60s perhaps, with the shrunken look of men who have stopped expecting anything. One is a boy, perhaps 2 years older than you, dark-haired, thin, who looks up when you enter and then looks away again without expression. The porter shows you your bed, 3rd from the door, right-hand side. He gives you your uniform, 2 shirts of coarse linen, grey-white, rough as sandpaper against your skin, a pair of trousers of thick fustian that scratches at your legs with every movement, a waistcoat of the same material, stockings of coarse wool, a pair of shoes with soles so thick and rigid they feel like wearing boards, all of it grey, all of it the same, all of it marked with the letters CHUM. Huddersfield Union Workhouse. Not your name, not your father's name, an abbreviation. You fold your own clothes and hand them to the porter, who takes them without ceremony and adds them to a shelf, labelled with a number that corresponds to your entry in the ledger. Your bundle, the spare shirt, the stockings, the Bible, the comb, is taken from you as well. Personal items are held in safe keeping, the porter says. The Bible, you say. Can I keep the Bible? He looks at you, not unsympathetically, not sympathetically either. Personal items are held in safe keeping, he says again. He leaves. You sit on the edge of your board mattress bed in your grey uniform with your number instead of your name and listen to the man near the window cough. And outside, somewhere in the building, below you and to the left, you hear a child crying. You tell yourself it's not Mary. You tell yourself that for a while. The daily timetable is posted on a board near the door. You read it that first evening by the light of a tallow candle that had been burning long enough to have dripped a small yellow stalactite down one side. 5:30 a.m. Rising bell. Dress, morning prayer. 6 a.m. Labour commences. 7 a.m. breakfast. 7:30 a.m. Labour commences. 12 p.m. dinner. 1 p.m. Labour commences. 6 p.m. supper. 8 p.m. prayers. Retirement to beds. That's it. That's the day. Every day. 6 days a week. On Sundays, the morning labour is replaced by chapel service. The diet on Sundays is slightly different. Slightly. You read the timetable 3 times and feel something strange happening in your chest. Not fear exactly, something more specific than fear. The feeling of a door closing, not with a slam, but with a slow, heavy, inevitable swing, the way a very large and well-made door swings when someone lets go of it from inside. The click of the latch. That. The first meal arrives at 6 o'clock. Not arrives. That implies someone bringing it to you. You walk to it. In a line, single file, down 2 flights of stairs, along a corridor, into the men's dining hall, which is a room about 40 feet long with trestle tables and benches. No tablecloths, no decorations, 2 candles at either end of the room providing light that barely reaches the middle. You sit. You wait. A bell rings. An old man at the head of the room says grace. You bow your head. You say amen with everyone else, automatically, the word coming out of habit while your eyes are already on the table, watching the women who serve the food moving along the rows. The food is bread. Brown bread, dense and slightly sour, cut into pieces of a specific measured size. Beside the bread, a tin bowl containing a dark liquid that smells of onion and something meaty. Faint, almost theoretical. You pick up your spoon. The other men have been doing this a while. They eat without comment, without ceremony, with the focused efficiency of people who have long since stopped expecting pleasure from meals and are engaged instead in the pure practical business of fueling a body that needs to work tomorrow. The soup is thin. You're searching your spoon for evidence of solid matter, and there isn't much. A few strings of something, a shred of what might be leek. The consistency of the water you've cooked oatmeal in, but not oatmeal, boiled down to its shadow. Broth, technically, but broth that has been extended far beyond its natural capacity for nourishment. It's warm, that's something. It's February and the dining hall is cold, and the warmth of the bowl against your hands is real. You eat the bread. The bread is better than the soup. The bread is actual food. You eat both pieces. You think about asking if there's more. You look at the man next to you. He's been here long enough that this is simply Tuesday. He eats his bread in measured bites, not fast, but not wasting time. He doesn't look at anything while he eats. He is elsewhere entirely. Behind his eyes, somewhere that has nothing to do with this room, you don't ask about more. When the bell rings again, everyone stands and the room files out in the same silent efficiency it filed in, and the meal is over. 8 minutes. That's how long supper takes. You're still hungry. Not acutely, not desperately. You ate enough to silence the sharpest edge of it. But there's a background low-level hunger that settles in behind your ribs and just stays there, patient, waiting. You'll come to know it very well. By March, you'll stop noticing it. By April, you'll notice it again. Worse. The morning starts before the sun. The rising bell goes at 5:30, and 5:30 in February in Yorkshire means absolute dark. The kind of dark that doesn't even have gradients. No faint grey at the window suggesting the possibility of morning. Just darkness and the sound of the bell and men around you beginning to move. Your body has not adjusted yet. It won't for weeks. The bell drags you out of sleep that was too shallow to do much good. The mattress is hard, the cold gets in at the edges of the single blanket, and the man with the cough coughs throughout the night at irregular intervals. Just when your body has accepted the pattern of it and started to drift down properly, another fit starts and you're awake again, listening to it scrape through the air. You dress in the dark. Grey shirt, grey fustian trousers scratching at your inner thighs where the seam is rough. The thick-soled shoes that your feet are not yet used to, raising blisters on your heels that haven't had time to harden into calluses. Morning prayers. 12 men and an old man who leads it. Words you know from church. Your mouth says them while your mind is somewhere in the building. on the other side of a wall you cannot cross, wondering if your mother slept. Then, breakfast. Gruel. Let me tell you about gruel. You've heard the word. If you grew up in any part of England in the 1840s, you've heard the word. It was the workhouse food, the thing you threaten children with. Eat your supper, or it's the workhouse and gruel for you. A word that stood for punishment disguised as sustenance. The reality of it is both worse and more boring than the word suggests. It is oatmeal. Specifically, it is coarse oatmeal, not the fine ground kind mixed with water and boiled. The ratio, as specified by the Poor Law Commission's dietary table, is approximately 2 ounces of oatmeal to 1 pint of water. You will get 1.5 pints of this per morning. That's it. No salt unless the cook is feeling generous or distracted. No milk, no sugar. Sometimes a scraping of dripping if a recent batch of boiling has produced enough fat. Usually not. What you end up with is a porridge of sorts, but thin, with the oatmeal swollen and soft but still slightly gritty. The colour of dishwater with ambitions. Warm, filling in the way that water is filling. It occupies space in your stomach and creates the sensation of having eaten something without delivering much that your body can actually use for the morning's labour. You eat it from a tin bowl. You use a spoon of the same grey tin. You sit at the same table in the same cold room. The man beside you, you'll learn his name is Caleb Sykes. He's 32. He was a weaver until the mill he worked in switched to power looms, and his wage fell to a level where the workhouse was the only alternative to starving. Eats his gruel without expression, systematically clearing the bowl entirely. Eat every bit, he says, without looking at you the first morning. Don't leave anything, and hold the bowl in both hands while you eat. You look at him. Warms your hands, he says. Labour starts in 10 minutes. You hold the bowl in both hands. He's right. The labour assigned to able-bodied men at Huddersfield Union in the 1840s varies by the season and the needs of the house. Stone breaking for road repair, wood chopping for the house's fires, digging in the house garden where vegetables are grown to supplement the dietary, cleaning, floors, yards, privies. But in winter, when the ground is frozen and the garden is dead and the stone-breaking yard is iced, there is bone crushing, and this is what you will do for the first 3 months of your time in the workhouse. Let me explain what bone crushing is. The workhouse system, particularly after the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, was required to make itself at least partially self-sustaining. The able-bodied poor should work to defray the cost of their own maintenance. This was philosophy as policy. Less eligibility was the principle. Life inside the workhouse should be less eligible, that is, less desirable, than the worst available life outside it. The diet, the conditions, the labour, all should be calibrated to function as a deterrent, ensuring that only the truly desperate entered, and that those who entered were motivated to leave. One of the ways workhouses generated income was by selling crushed bone to farmers as fertiliser. This works because bone is rich in phosphorus and calcium, both of which do wonders for tired soil. Ground down fine enough, the consistency of coarse sand, it releases into the earth slowly and keeps fields productive for years. To get bone to that consistency, someone has to crush it. The bone-crushing yard is at the back of the workhouse, behind the kitchen. It is an open, cobbled space, roughly 20 yards square, with a roof over one section held up by wooden poles. which means it is partially protected from rain but entirely open to wind. In February, the wind comes off the moors to the northwest, and it arrives with a temperature that makes your eyes water, and your fingertips go from cold to painful to, after a while, a strange neutral numbness that you've learned to be wary of. Numb fingers don't tell you when they're bleeding. Numb fingers don't tell you when they've been cut on a bone fragment. The bones arrive in sacks. They are not clean. The workhouse purchases them from slaughterhouses, tanneries, rendering houses, cattle mostly, some pig, occasionally horse. They are the leftovers of the animal after everything commercially useful has been taken. The meat, the hide, the fat, the sinew. What remains is the skeleton, or pieces of it, stripped but not stripped quite clean, still carrying fragments of dried tissue and gristle in the joints and the crevices, still smelling of the animals they came from. After a week in a storage shed, waiting to be crushed, they smell of more than that. The crushing itself is done with the long-handled mallets, heavy iron heads on wooden handles, worn smooth by the hands of everyone who's used them before you. You take a bone, place it on a flat stone, and you hit it, again and again, until it splinters, until the splinters are fragments, until the fragments are pieces small enough to pass through the wire sieve they make you shake them through after. The first day, your arms ache from the mallet weight after an hour. By the end of the morning session, your shoulders burn and your hands, despite their numbness, have developed blisters at the base of each finger where the wood handle rubs. By the end of the week, the blisters have burst and the skin underneath has hardened. By the end of the second week, you have the hands of a man who's been doing manual labour for years. Your grip is different. Your palms are different. Your hands hurt every night when you lie down. You hold them up in the dark sometimes and feel the difference. The cracks in the skin along the knuckles, the roughness of the palm, the place at the base of your right thumb where the mallet handle has created a callus so thick it feels like someone else's skin. You're 15 years old. There is a sound to bone crushing. This is something nobody tells you, but it becomes one of the defining sounds of your time here, a sound you'll hear when you're older and somewhere completely else and something incidental, the crack of a walnut, a branch breaking under weight, will bring you back to this yard so completely that the smell comes with it. When a dry bone cracks under the mallet, it makes a sound that is partway between a crack and a crunch, hollow and dense at the same time. You can feel it up your arms when you do it right, a vibration that travels from the iron mallet head through the handle and into your hands and wrists, a sound with mass to it. When a bone is fresher, not fully dried, it makes a different sound, softer, more yielding, more biological, a sound that is less like breaking rock and more like something else, something your body recognizes and your mind immediately works to classify as not what it sounds like. The smell of fresh bones is worse. Within a week, you stop thinking about it. This, you'll learn, is the workhouse's true talent. Not punishment, not cruelty, exactly. Normalization. The ability to take something that your first day self would find unbearable and turn it, through repetition and the absence of alternatives, into something that simply is, a fact of the day, a thing that happens, a thing you do. By March, you crush bone for 5 hours a day and don't think about it while you do it. Your mind goes elsewhere, to Marsden, to the field behind your old house where you used to help with the hay, to your father's face which is beginning, and this frightens you more than you know how to name, to become less precise in your memory. the exact line of his jaw, whether his eyes were dark brown or dark grey. You crush bone and try to remember your father's face. Caleb Sykes works next to you. He's not a talkative man. He's not unfriendly either, just settled into a kind of patient endurance that doesn't require much conversation. But in the afternoons, when the morning's labour has established a rhythm and the yard is loud enough with the sound of mallets that the master won't hear individual voices, he talks sometimes. He was a weaver, 13 years at a mill in Lockwood. Then the looms changed, and the wage changed, and his wife got sick, and the medicine cost money they didn't have, and she died anyway. And then there was just him and no work, and eventually the parish ran out of patients and the workhouse ran out of alternatives to the workhouse. He's been here 11 months. Does it get easier, you ask him one afternoon. The wind is particularly bad today, coming straight across the yard and making your eyes stream. He thinks about it. Not easier, he says. You get harder. He brings his mallet down on a long bone. Femur maybe, though you're not sure if it's cattle or horse. You've stopped looking too closely. And it splinters cleanly along its length, the two halves spinning away across the stone. The wanting easier stops, he says. That's the closest it gets. You think about that for a while. Tuesday dinner. Let me tell you about Tuesday dinner. The official dietary table for the Huddersfield Union, as approved by the Board of Guardians, specifies for able-bodied men. Dinner on alternating days consisting of cooked meat with vegetables, and on remaining days a portion of bread with broth or soup. The key word here is broth. The kitchen at Huddersfield Union produces broth in a copper vessel approximately 4 feet across and 3 feet deep, mounted over a fire that is lit at 4 in the morning and kept going until noon. You can smell it from the second-floor ward when you wake up. On broth days, the smell reaches the ward before the rising bell, which means you wake to it already in your mouth, this thick animal and vegetable smell that promises more than it delivers. The process of making the broth begins with bones. The bones from the crushing yard, once ground down to the required consistency, are sold. But before they reach the yard, the large bones from recent slaughterhouse deliveries are held back, boiled first, to extract what nourishment remains. This is standard practice and entirely legitimate. The Poor Law Commission's own dietary guidelines acknowledge bone broth as a nutritional supplement. There are pamphlets about it. What the pamphlets don't always address is what bones, specifically. Let me tell you what Thomas, what you, learn in your 6th week in the workhouse, when the boy with dark hair whose name is William Holt, age 17, from Slaithwaite, who's been here since last March and therefore knows things you don't, takes you aside in the bone-crushing yard during the mid-morning break, when the older men are having their water ration. "You seen what came in this morning?" William says. You haven't. You were still at morning prayers when the cart arrived. "From Sugden's," he says. Sugden's is a rendering house on the Bradford Road. You know this because Caleb mentioned it once, mentioned it with a look on his face that said more than his words. What did they bring? William looks at you. He has the look of someone who's about to tell you something they themselves wish they didn't know. "Horse," he says. A pause. "They bring horse bones sometimes, when the cattle and pig stock runs low." You look at him. "Horse bones are horse bones, you say? Same as—" "The hooves," William says. A silence, longer this time, in which the sound of distant mallets continues and the wind moves across the top of the stone wall and a cart passes somewhere on the road beyond. They boil the hooves, William says. The rendering house, they take everything, boil it down for glue. The liquor that's left, after the glue's made, after the collagen's drawn out, they sell that too. Sell it to anyone who'll buy it, and the house buys it sometimes when it's cheap. He looks at you steadily. It's what's in the Tuesday soup, he says. Some of it, not all of it, but some of it. You stand very still. The taste of Tuesday's broth is in your mouth suddenly. Had been a vague warmth, a thin savouriness, something to swallow your bread with. Now it has a name, and the name changes it completely. Not the taste itself, but the meaning of the taste, the thing behind it, the thing the liquid passed through on its way to your bowl. How do you know, you ask? Cook's assistant, William says. Boy called Ned, he told me, he unloads the deliveries. He picks up his mallet. Break is over. Don't think about it too much, he says. You're hungry and it's warm and it's Tuesday. He's right. You pick up your mallet. You think about it the entire afternoon. That evening in the dining hall, you look at the broth differently. It's the same tin bowl, the same thinned dark liquid, pale brown, with its rings of faint grease on the surface. The smell you know so well by now that you can't separate it from Tuesday itself. The man across from you eats without looking at anything. Caleb eats with the same patient efficiency he brings to everything. The old men at the far end of the table eat slowly because their teeth aren't up to the bread and they need the liquid to soften it. Everyone eats. You eat too. This is the thing you learn about hunger. It has a hierarchy it enforces that is entirely separate from what you think or feel or know. Your thoughts about the broth and your body's response to the broth are two different systems, and the body's system has been running considerably longer and takes precedence. You eat. The broth is warm and thin, and has a smell of old meat to it and a taste of something long cooked and drawn out and reduced. You eat your bread with it, and the bread softens in the liquid and becomes something almost pleasant, starchy and yielding, and your body accepts all of it without comment. After supper, walking back to the ward, you pause at the corridor window that faces west, toward the kitchen end of the building. The copper in there is being cleaned now, scoured out with brushes and lye soap for tomorrow. You can't see it, but you know it's there, and you know what it held, and in 6 days it will hold it again. There are rules. There are always rules in the workhouse. Written rules, posted on boards at intervals throughout the building, read aloud by the master at the monthly all-hands assembly, and unwritten rules that you learn from the men around you, mostly in the form of warnings after near misses, the way all practical wisdom passes. Written rules. No conversation during labour without permission from the overseer. No communication between the male and female wards except through the master or matron. No tobacco, no alcohol, no possession of money, no food to be taken from the dining hall. Attendance at chapel on Sunday is mandatory. Attempting to leave the workhouse without being formally discharged is cause for immediate confinement in the refractory ward. The refractory ward is in the basement. You never see it. You see one man come out of it after 3 days in it, and that's enough. Unwritten rules. Caleb tells you some of them in the first week. Never be last in line for meals. Not because they run out. They don't. Not quite. But because the last in line get the serving from the bottom of the pot, and the bottom of the pot is where the composition of the broth becomes most apparent. Never look the master directly in the eye unless he's spoken to you first. The master's name is Mr. Bracewell. He wears a dark blue frock coat and keeps his account books with a precision that extends, it seems, to everything. The way he moves through the wards, the way he conducts his inspections, the specific duration and intensity of his disapproval when something displeases him. He is not a cruel man. He's not a kind one. He is correct in the way that a legal document is correct. Never volunteer for cleaning the refractory cells, even if it means staying in the boneyard an extra hour. Learn your overseer's moods. The bone-crushing yard overseer is a heavy-set man named Fenton, who comes from somewhere in Lancashire, and who has particular fondness for bread and dripping, and who can sometimes be caught in the mid-afternoon, in a state of post-bred mellowness that allows conversation, even questions, even the occasional very quiet complaint about the cold without consequence. The opposite of Fenton's melted afternoons is his Monday mornings, which are their own weather system. Never ask about your family directly through official channels if you want an honest answer. Ask one of the women who works in the kitchen. Some of them are inmates themselves, classified as able-bodied women assigned to domestic work, to relay a message through the matron's ward inspection rounds. They know how to do this. They've been doing it for years. You ask about your family through the kitchen on the third week. The reply comes back 10 days later, through the same channel. Your mother and Mary are in the women's and children's ward. Your mother has been assigned to laundry work. Mary is in the children's school. Agnes is in the girls' ward and has been assigned to help with mending. They are well. You read this message, relayed through Caleb via a woman named Sarah, who works in the kitchen, and who is serving out a 2-year stay following a dispute about the relief she was owed after her husband went to prison. And you feel several things at once. Relief, primarily. Your mother is well. Mary is in school, which she'll hate, but which at least means she's fed and indoors. And underneath the relief, something else. The distance of it. The specificity of not knowing. Mary is in school, but you can't see her face. Your mother is doing laundry, but you don't know if she's cold in the laundry room, if the work is hard on her back, if she cried when they brought her in the way she didn't cry in front of you, but must have cried when you couldn't see. They are well. 3 words. You fold them up small in your mind and keep them next to the memory of your father's face, which is becoming less precise every week, and you get back to work. Let me be exact about this, because exactness matters here. The Poor Law Commission's dietary tables, updated in 1836, prescribed a weekly diet for able-bodied men in workhouses. I'm going to tell you what it said, and then I'm going to tell you what you actually received, and then I'm going to tell you what that meant in the body of a 15-year-old boy doing heavy physical labour for 9 hours a day. The official weekly ration for an able-bodied male inmate: roughly 168 ounces of bread or equivalent, 24 ounces of cooked meat twice a week, 14 pints of gruel across 7 mornings, 7 pints of broth or soup across 7 dinners on non-meat days, 14 ounces of cheese or equivalent weekly, small beer or buttermilk. On paper, this is survivable, not comfortable, not nourishing in a way that accounts for heavy labour, but survivable. What you actually receive: the gruel is frequently more diluted than prescribed. The kitchen operates under its own constraints. The cook is responsible for feeding 400 mouths 3 times daily on a budget that has been approved by a board of guardians that meets once a month and has very strong opinions about economy. The gap between approved budget and actual feeding is closed the way it always is in institutions, quietly, gradually, in quantities too small to produce an individual complaint, by extending what you have slightly further than it was meant to go. The meat, which is supposed to appear twice weekly, appears once, sometimes once and a half, if the delivery was good. The meat itself is the cheapest cut of the cheapest animal available, mostly shin of beef, boiled down until the fibres come apart. Sometimes the gristled ends of joints that no butcher would sell at proper price. Once, in your 3rd month, something your fork doesn't recognise and which Caleb identifies by smell and taste alone as pig's head. He eats it without comment. You eat it. The bread is real, and the bread is sufficient, and the bread is the thing your body relies on most heavily. 2 ounces at breakfast, 4 at dinner, 4 at supper on days without meat. It's coarse brown bread, dense and slightly sour from the way it's made in the house's own bakehouse, but real bread with real substance to it. And after 6 weeks in the workhouse, you have developed the specific relationship with this bread that the very hungry develop with the thing that keeps them alive. A kind of attentive reverence that you never experienced with bread before and will probably never quite lose. The cheese happens once a week, as a hard, salt-dried piece, the size of 3 fingers pressed together, distributed at Sunday supper after chapel. It tastes, at this point in your life, like the best thing in the world. You eat it in very small bites to make it last. What you're missing, in terms of what your body actually needs, fat, mostly fat. The gruel has none. The broth has traces. The meat twice weekly, once weekly in practice, has some. But for a growing boy doing heavy physical work in cold weather, the fat content of what you're eating is somewhere around half of what you need to maintain body temperature and repair muscle tissue, and fuel the kind of labour that your arms and back are performing for 9 hours of every day. By the end of March, you are visibly thinner than when you arrived. By the end of April, there are hollows above your collarbones that weren't there before. Your trouser waistband, which fit correctly when the uniform was issued, has been quietly cinched tighter by a piece of cord that you found in the yard, and which you've wound around your waist under the waistcoat knotted at the front. The cord is not permitted. Personal modifications to the uniform are not permitted. You wear it anyway. The cold is worse when you're thinner. The cold gets in differently, finds the places where there's less of you and fills them with icy air, and by morning the single grey blanket is not enough, and you wake curled into the smallest shape you can make of yourself, feet tucked under, knees to chest, hands between thighs for warmth, and still cold. Caleb shows you in the 2nd month how to fold your jacket across the blanket at night for extra insulation. Small knowledge, practical. The kind of thing that makes 2 degrees of difference and means you fall asleep faster. Sunday is different. Not dramatically, not in a way that a visitor would notice, but you notice. Chapel at 8 in the morning, which means rising bell at the normal time, but no labour after morning prayers. You walk to chapel instead, which takes you through a corridor you don't normally use, past a window that faces east toward the moors, and on a clear morning in early spring you can see them. The long, dark line of the hills rising above the buildings opposite, still brown and grey with winter at this time of year, but there, real, far away and enormous. You stop at that window every Sunday morning for as long as Fenton lets you get away with it, which is usually about 15 seconds before he clears his throat behind you. The moors are there. That matters. Chapel is an hour. The chaplain is a young man from Leeds named Mr. Peel, who who has the anxious energy of someone who is doing the best he can in a situation that keeps revealing new depths of complexity. He preaches on Sundays with a specific emphasis on endurance, patience, God's purposes being beyond human understanding, the dignity of honest labour. These are useful sermons for people in a workhouse in the way that telling someone in a burning building that fire is instructive is useful. But Mr. Peel also does something else. He knows your name, not your number, not Hartley T, admitted February 12th, classified able-bodied, your actual name. He uses it when he speaks to you after chapel, on the Sundays when he makes his rounds through the ward. He calls you Thomas. This is, in the workhouse, a peculiar and significant thing. The workhouse system is not designed to notice you as Thomas. It is designed to process you as a unit of need, to maintain you at a standard of bare sufficiency, to encourage your departure through the mechanism of your own discomfort. Your name is, in practical terms, bureaucratically irrelevant. Mr. Peel asks how you are. You say fine, because you don't have language yet for the precise quality of not fine that you are. He asks about your family, because he's seen your mother in the women's service and knows. She's in the building. He asks what you did in Marsden, what your father's work was, whether you've had any schooling. These questions are small, and you answer them shortly, the way you've learned to be short about everything in this place, reserving energy and warmth for things that cost less. But one Sunday in late April, Mr. Peel asks you something different. What do you think about during the labour? And you answer honestly, which surprises you. My father, you say, trying to remember his face exactly. Mr. Peel is quiet for a moment. How long ago did he pass? October, 6 months. It's still recent, he says. Give yourself time. The sharpness of the image comes and goes. It's not that you're forgetting. It's that memory is not a painting. It moves. You look at him. Does it come back, you ask? In pieces, he says, over years, in ways you don't expect. A smell sometimes, a quality of light. He looks at the chapel window. Early morning sun is hitting the stone of the outer wall at an angle that turns it almost golden for a few minutes. The one time of day when the building seems capable of warmth. The people we love don't leave us entirely, he says. They become part of how we see things. Then he moves on to the next man, and you go back to your ward and you sit on your bed for the permitted hour of private time on Sunday afternoon, and you don't crush bone and you don't eat gruel and you just sit very still and think about what he said. And for a moment, not long, maybe 3 minutes, the ache behind your ribs is different, not lighter, different, shaped differently, more bearable somehow in its new shape. Every fortnight on the second Thursday, a small group of able-bodied men is selected for an external work party. This means going outside, not a recreational outside, not a visit. An actual work detail, cutting and collecting dead wood from a copse of trees about a mile from the workhouse that belongs to one of the guardian landowners and which requires clearing in spring. The wood is brought back in a cart. The work takes the better part of a day. Caleb goes on these parties sometimes. In March, he puts your name forward to Fenton, who notes it without commitment, and then in early April, Fenton reads your name off the list one morning and something happens in your chest that is disproportionately physical, for what is, technically, just a change in location. You are going outside. The morning of the work party, April 8th, 1846. You know the date because you've been marking time on a mental ledger since you arrived. Not because anyone told you to, but because it became necessary. Some accounting that your mind needed to keep in order to believe that time was passing, that you weren't in some static grey fog where Tuesdays were always Tuesdays and February was perpetually February. The morning of April 8th, you dress in the same grey uniform, but over it they give you a heavy canvas smock for outdoor work, and you follow Fenton and 7 other men through the workhouse gate. The gate opens, you walk through it. The air outside is different. This sounds like a small thing. It is not a small thing. You've been breathing workhouse air for nearly 2 months. The gruel smell, the carbolic, the particular indoor atmosphere of many bodies in enclosed space, and you've stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing any constant. But the moment you step through the gate, you notice it again by contrast. Outside air smells of mud and distance and faint green things just starting, and something cold moving in from the northwest that is recognisably moorland air, the kind you breathed every day of your life in Marsden without ever thinking about it. You breathe it, and your whole body does something involuntary. Not quite a shudder, not quite a sob. Something halfway between the two that you manage to convert into a breath before Fenton notices, walking ahead with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the road. The world is enormous. This is the other thing you notice. After 8 weeks inside walls, the world is physically enormous. The sky is too wide. The road stretches away in both directions with no boundaries, no constraints, no schedule. A woman with a basket is walking toward you, and she is not in a grey uniform, and she's not in a line, and she's walking wherever she likes, at whatever speed she chooses, and the sheer unregulated freedom of this normal action makes you feel something close to vertigo. You keep walking. The road takes you through the edge of Huddersfield itself, past terraced houses with washing in the backyards, and shops just opening up for the morning. A baker pulling trays through a window. A woman scrubbing a step. 2 children chasing each other around a corner shrieking. A dog investigating a doorstep with scientific thoroughness. The smell of the bakers. You stop walking for half a second, just half a second. The smell reaches you. Bread. Real bread baking, white bread. The kind you don't get in the workhouse. With a sweetness to it from some enrichment in the dough. And your mouth fills immediately and violently with saliva, and you're back in your mother's kitchen at home, at the house in Marsden, which smelled of exactly this on Friday mornings when she baked, and your father's heavy footstep on the threshold, and the light in that kitchen, which was never quite the same in any other room. Move up, Fenton says. Don't gawp. You move up. The baker's door closes behind someone entering and takes the smell with it. The work itself, cutting dead wood from the frozen wet ground of a scrubby copse of ash and birch, is cold and muddy and physically hard in a different way than bone-crushing. But you don't mind. You don't mind any of it. You use the axe with both hands, and the clean splitting sound of dry wood is different from bone, and you can see the moors from the top of the rise above the copse. And once, just once, a curlew calls somewhere in the grey-white sky above you. That long descending sound that means the high ground in spring. That means Marsden and the fields above the village where you used to go with your father to check the sheep boundary walls in March. Curlew. You stop chopping for a moment. Look up. Can't find it in the sky. You all right, lad? One of the older men asks. He's watching you from across the copse. Fine, you say. Thought I heard something. The curlew calls again, further away now, moving northeast. You pick up the axe. The work party returns at dusk, pulling the cart. The gate opens. You file back in. The gate closes. Supper is bread and a thin potato soup, and you eat it without tasting it much because you're still outside in your head, still on the road with the baker's smell and the curlew and the too wide sky, and you stay there as long as you can before the grey walls of the dining hall reassert themselves and you come back. William Holt is across from you at supper. He looks at your face. "Good day," he says. "Yes," you say. He nods, doesn't press it. He's been on the work parties himself. He knows what they mean, and he knows you don't have language for it yet, and he has the decency to leave it alone. 3 weeks after the work party, something unexpected happens. The boy named Ned, who works in the kitchen and who was William's source about the broth contents, sprains his wrist badly enough that he can't lift anything for a week. The cook, a large, practical woman named Mrs. Hay, who has been at the workhouse for 9 years and who operates with the organisational intelligence of the military commander working under permanent resource shortage, requests a temporary replacement from the male ward. Fenton, who's been watching you with something approaching approval since you stopped complaining about the cold and started doing your proper quota of bone crushing without being told twice, puts your name forward. For 1 week you work in the kitchen. This changes several things. The first change, food. This is not because Mrs. Hay is corrupt or generous to the point of rule breaking. It's because in a kitchen, you're physically surrounded by food in a way that is completely different from receiving food at a meal, and occasionally a ladle of something misses the pot and has to be wiped from the floor, and occasionally a piece of bread is broken at an angle that makes it unsuitable for the regulation serving. And Mrs. Hay has a philosophy about waste that is very specific and entirely unrecorded. Nothing gets wasted. By the end of the first day, you have eaten a piece of bread and 2 ladle scrapings of broth that were technically cleaning the equipment. By the end of the week, your trousers are slightly less cinched by the cord. The second change, understanding. In the kitchen, you learn exactly what goes into the feeding of 400 people with the budget the Guardians provide. Mrs. Hay doesn't explain it to you. She doesn't explain anything, she directs. But watching her work is itself an explanation. The arithmetic of the place, performed not in account books but in pots and sacks and careful measurements. The oatmeal sacks. How many? Divided how? To last a week. The bread ration. The bread made daily in the bakehouse. The specific calibration of the loaves so that each comes out the same weight. The broth. What goes into it and why? On Tuesday morning you see what Tuesday's broth starts with. Mrs. Hay directs you to bring the delivery from the side entrance. 2 sacks from a cart that smells of Sugden's rendering house before you've opened the door. Inside the sacks, bones, as expected. Long cattle bones mostly, and the cleaned off knuckle joints of something large. And at the bottom of the second sack, something you can't quite identify until Mrs. Hay lifts it out herself, holds it up briefly, sets it in the boiling copper with the others. A horse's hoof. You've seen them before in the bone-crushing yard. Horses' feet come in periodically. The hoof itself, the hard keratinous casing, the frog of the foot, the associated bones, is a substantial thing. Dense and layered. It takes a long time to boil down. Mrs. Hay puts it in the copper without ceremony. She's a practical woman. She knows what she's been given and she knows what she needs to make from it, and the gap between those two things is where her skill lives. Takes the whole morning, she says. Not to you particularly. You're just there, within earshot. Needs to be at the boil from 5 o'clock. By noon you've got your base. She says base as if it were any other cooking term. which it is technically. You stand at the copper and look at the water beginning to move with the heat, the hoof visible at the bottom, its hard outer casing already beginning to give off a film on the surface of the water. It smells of animal, something old and worked, leather and horn and the long history of a creature that carried people and pulled carts and was useful until it wasn't. You stand there longer than you should. Stir it, Mrs. Hay says. You pick up the long wooden paddle and you stir. You don't tell anyone you stirred the soup that Tuesday. It doesn't seem like the right story to tell. What you carry away from the week in the kitchen isn't the hoof specifically. That knowledge you already had, in the abstract. What you carry away is Mrs. Hay herself. She feeds 400 people every day. She does it with the resources she's given, which are not enough, and she maximizes them with a skill and a thoroughness that is objectively extraordinary. She wastes nothing. She calculates everything. She knows the dietary tables and she knows the actual budget, and she navigates the distance between them daily, alone, without complaint. She's not paid well for this. She's an employee of the Board of Guardians at a wage that, if you found out the figure, would astonish you with its smallness. She lives in 2 rooms above the kitchen. She has been doing this for 9 years. On your last day in the kitchen, when Ned's wrist has healed enough for him to return, you're washing the copper after the noon dinner service, a job that involves climbing inside it with a brush and scrubbing, a job with a smell and a temperature that you will never forget, and Mrs. Hay passes behind you on her way to something else. She stops. She sets something on the edge of the copper rim, a piece of bread, a real piece, from a loaf that came out slightly wrong from the bakehouse that morning, too dense in the middle to serve properly, meant for the slop bucket. "For when you're done," she says. She walks away. You finish scrubbing. You eat the bread inside the copper, sitting cross-legged with the brush in your lap and the smell of old broth and carbolic around you. And the bread is dense and slightly wrong, and it's the best thing you've eaten since you arrived. You eat it very slowly. Summer changes the workhouse. Not dramatically. The walls are the same walls, the schedule is the same schedule, but the light changes. The days lengthen and the labour shifts. Bone crushing gives way to garden work as the ground thaws and then warms, and garden work is different. Your hands are in soil instead of striking stone. You're outside. The sky above the workhouse yard is blue, sometimes actual blue, and the smell of the turned earth comes up through the work, and it smells like a different life. A life where things grow. Your mother's kitchen garden in Marsden. Your father turning the beds in April. You plant turnips and cabbage in rows, on your knees in the garden plot, pressing seeds into the earth with your thumb. The overseer, Fenton still, though slightly more bearable in summer, walks the rows and checks the spacing with the eye of a man who has grown workhouse vegetables long enough to have standards. "Closer," he says, pointing at your turnip seeds. You close them. "Good," he says, and moves on, and that is praise. July 15th, a Wednesday. You're on garden duty, weeding between the bean rows, when a bell rings from inside the building. Not the meal bell, not the labour bell, the third bell, the one that means a formal visitor or an inspection. Mr. Bracewell's voice carrying from somewhere near the gate. An hour later, Fenton calls your name from the ward doorway. "Hartley, you've got a visitor in the meeting room. 10 minutes. You don't know what this means for a moment. Nobody comes to visit you. You have no relatives within visiting distance except in this building, on the other side of walls you can't cross. You have no, then you understand, your mother. The Board of Guardians permits, as a concession that varies by house and by master's temperament, an occasional supervised meeting between male and female inmates of the same family unit. This is not guaranteed. It's not on the schedule. It happens when circumstances allow, and when the master judges it appropriate, and when nobody has been in the refractory ward recently or caused administrative inconvenience. You wash your hands at the yard pump, which runs cold and clean and makes your cracked skin sting. You smooth your uniform. You walk to the meeting room, which is a small room near the master's office, with 2 chairs and a table, and a window facing the inner yard, and a smell of beeswax polish that suggests it's used for official purposes when not serving as this. Your mother is already there. She stands when you come in, and then neither of you does anything for a moment because the protocols of this place have got into you both in ways you didn't notice, until they need to not be there, and then she crosses the room and puts her arms round you and holds on. 5 months. She is thinner than she was. Her face has the look that the workhouse gives everyone eventually. A careful, managed blankness that covers everything underneath and preserves energy for the things that matter. Her hair, which she always kept pinned neatly, is pinned under the workhouse matron cap. She smells of laundry starch and the same carbolic soap you smell on yourself. She holds on for a long time. "You're well?" she says into your shoulder. "Yes," you say. "You?" "Yes." A pause. "Mary," you say. "She's in the school. They're teaching her reading. She hates it." A small sound from your mother that is almost a laugh. "She says the teacher smells of chalk." Agnes. Agnes is fine. Agnes is always fine. She pulls back to look at you. Her eyes go to your face, your hands. The hands she notices, the way they've changed, the roughened skin and the calluses. And something moves across her face that she manages before it becomes anything she'd name out loud. "They're feeding you enough," she says. "Yes," you say, which is not entirely true, but is not entirely a lie either. She studies you. "I've been in contact with your Uncle Robert," she says quietly. The way people in this room speak when they know the walls carry sound and the master's office is not far. "In Bradford. He knows we're here. He's looking for work of a kind that would let him take us in." Uncle Robert, your father's younger brother, a printer's compositor in Bradford. You've met him perhaps 4 times in your life. "How long, you ask?" "I don't know. He's careful with money. He'd need to be settled." She pauses. "Months, probably. Maybe until Christmas." Christmas. You do the arithmetic. 8 months. 8 more months of gruel and grey and the fustian uniform and the smell of bone broth on Tuesdays. 8 months is a long time. It is also, you understand in this moment, a number. An actual number. Not an indefinite grey stretch. A number with a Christmas at the end of it. And behind Christmas, your uncle's house in Bradford and your sister's and your mother in the same building. "All right," you say. She takes your hand, holds it, turns it over and looks at the palm, the calluses, the place where the skin has cracked and healed and cracked again above the knuckle. "You're working hard," she says. "It's all right," you say. She squeezes your hand once. Hard. "Your father," she says. Stops. Starts again. "He would be proud of you." You look at the floor for a moment. Then you look up at her. "I've been trying to remember his face," you say. "The exact way his face looked." She's quiet. "I know," she says. "Me too." Another silence. "He had a way of tilting his head," she says. when he was listening to something like this. She tilts her own head slightly, left, down, and immediately, something snaps back into place in your memory, a detail you didn't know you'd lost until it returns, the particular way your father listened, that slight tilt, attentive and patient. Yes, you say. That's him, she says. Keep that. The meeting lasts 25 minutes. A warden checks his watch at the door and clears his throat, and your mother lets go of your hand and stands up straight, and you stand up straight, and she walks back to the women's wing and you walk back to the garden, and Fenton is already where you left him, checking the spacing of the bean rows, and he looks up when you return. Back to it, he says. You get back to it. The bean rows, your hands in the soil, the sky above the workhouse wall. Christmas. In August, something happens that is not local but which reaches into the workhouse and changes the atmosphere of the place, subtly, the way a change in the weather changes everything it touches without quite breaking anything. The Andover workhouse scandal. It comes to you in fragments, the way news always comes to people with limited access to newspapers, pieces of it relayed through the chain of the work detail men who occasionally see a newspaper at shop doorway, supplemented by what Mr. Peel knows and is willing to say, amended by rumour and the particular creativity of confined people working with partial information. What actually happened in Andover, Hampshire in 1845 and was now coming to Parliament's full attention in the summer of 1846. The Andover workhouse had been a bone-crushing workhouse too. Its inmates had been so chronically underfed. The master, a man named MacDougall, had been misappropriating the dietary budget for his own household for years, that the men in the crushing yard had been discovered gnawing on the bones they were meant to be crushing. Not marrow bones, which at least have something in them, old, dried, already used bones, sucking whatever minimal nutrition remained. Gnawing. Members of Parliament had been questioning witnesses for months. The investigation was tearing apart the entire philosophical framework of the workhouse system. It was revealing, formally and on record, what everyone inside any workhouse already knew, that the gap between the prescribed diet and the actual diet was not an accident or an anomaly. It was systemic. It was the consequence of a system that treated the cost of human maintenance as a problem to be minimized, administered by people whose competence and honesty varied enormously and whose oversight was minimal. Mr. Peel tells you some of this on a Sunday in September. Not all of it. He chooses what he judges appropriate, what he thinks will illuminate rather than simply distress. But enough. The commission is under review, he says. There will likely be changes. What kind of changes, you ask? He pauses in the way people pause when they are about to be honest about uncertainty. I don't know yet. More oversight, I hope. Better inspection. Another pause. The basic question of what people are owed when they have nothing is not a question the inquiry quite asks, but it's the one that needs asking. You think about the copper, Tuesday's soup, the hoof. Mr. Peel, you say. Yes. If someone told the Guardians about what goes in the broth, about the rendering house stock, would anything change? He looks at you carefully. How specific is this if someone told? Specific. He's quiet for a moment. I think, he says carefully, that the dietary practices of this house are likely within the technical specifications of the Commission's current tables, even if the spirit of those tables is being stretched somewhat. He pauses. What I think more clearly is that the current climate of scrutiny means the Guardians are paying attention, and that a formal complaint made through appropriate channels about the quality of the dietary would be received differently in September 1846 than it would have been in September 1844. He looks at you. I think it would be worth making. 3 weeks later, Caleb Sykes brings a formal complaint to the Weekly Guardian's hearing. He does it calmly, without anger, with the kind of flat factual precision of a man who has been deciding how to say something for a long time and has finally worked out the exact words. He states that the broth served on specified days contains material sourced from a rendering house, specifically including equine bone material and hoof-derived stock, which he believes falls below the nutritional standard implied by the dietary tables. He names his source. He names Ned, who confirms it, because Mr. Peel had spoken to Ned first, and Ned, who is 16 and has been in the workhouse since he was 11, turns out to have been waiting for precisely this kind of permission for a considerable time. The Guardians listen. Mr. Bracewell listens. The following week, the Tuesday broth is noticeably different, slightly thicker, identifiably vegetable, a flavour of onion and turnip that you can actually name, some shreds of meat. It stays different, not dramatically, not transformed. The same basic structure of workhouse feeding maintained within the same basic budget. But the floor of it has been raised slightly, and the specific thing you've been swallowing on Tuesdays is no longer in the soup. Caleb eats his new broth on Tuesday without comment. You eat yours. You said something, you tell him after. You told William, he says. William told me. A pause. Sometimes saying something is the only thing left, he says. You say it, and see what happens. Autumn. The garden work ends. The vegetables are harvested and stored in the root cellar under the kitchen. Turnips and cabbages and potatoes stacked in the cool dark. You and the other garden men carry them down the cellar stairs in baskets, smell the good dark smell of root vegetables stored properly, the smell that means winter survived. The bone-crushing resumes. The yard is colder now. The light goes earlier. By October, the rising bell rings into darkness, and darkness still holds at breakfast, and you work all morning in grey half-light, before the sun manages to clear the rooftop. Your hands, which had softened slightly during the garden months, harden again. Your ears, which have been noticing birdsong, the swallows over the yard in July, the swifts in August, the particular way the starlings move in the evenings, stop noticing because there's nothing to notice. The birds have gone south. The sky above the workhouse yard is the blank pewter sky of Yorkshire in November, low and heavy, smelling of coal smoke from the town. Winter begins. The blanket is not enough. You fold your jacket again. In November, the man with the cough, Thomas Pemberton, 63, former weaver, been in the house for 3 years, dies. He dies on a Monday night. You hear him through most of the night, worse than usual, a different quality to it, and in the morning he doesn't rise at the bell. The medical officer comes, the porter comes, the bed is stripped and the mattress turned. By evening there is a new man in the bed. The workhouse doesn't pause for this, it doesn't have the machinery for pausing. The new man's name is Andrew Gill, he's 40-something, from Holmfirth, and he has the thin, closed face of someone who hasn't eaten properly in weeks before this and is both grateful for the gruel and ashamed of the gratitude. You know this face. You had it once. You tell him about the jacket. Folded over the blanket, he looks at you. Aye, he says. Right. He folds the jacket. Some knowledge is just knowledge. You pass it on because you have it. December comes, and with December, a letter. delivered through the official channel, opened and read by the master before being passed to you, this being the workhouse protocol for correspondence. You receive it at morning assembly, your name called. The paper handed to you, already folded back, already read, already considered and deemed unproblematic. It is from your Uncle Robert. He has secured a position at a larger Bradford printing firm, an improvement in wage that now makes the arrangement viable. He has spoken to his landlord about a larger room. He expects to be in a position to apply for your family's discharge and take you all in by the first week of January. January, 6 weeks. You read the letter 3 times in the dining hall with the sound of 400 people eating gruel around you. 6 weeks. December 31st, 1846. The last day of the year. It's not treated as anything special in the workhouse. The timetable doesn't acknowledge calendrical significance. The rising bell rings at 5:30, same as always. The gruel is the same gruel. The boneyard is the same boneyard, though it's so cold today that your breath clouds in front of you, and Fenton's own face is red and pinched, and even he doesn't linger over the morning's quota. But in your head, today is the day before the year that contains January, which contains the first week of January, which contains your uncle's arrival and the gate opening outward. 6 days. In the afternoon, a rare thing, the overseer grants the boneyard an early finish due to temperature, and you get an extra hour before supper. Most men go to the ward to be warm. You go to the corridor window that faces west. From this window, in the right season, you can see the hills. In summer they're brown and gold and purple with heather. In winter they're grey-blue in the distance, snow on the tops, blurred at the edges by the low cloud. You stand at the window. The hills. The same hills you could see from the road above Marsden. Not exactly these hills, you're on the Huddersfield side, the wrong angle for your village, but the same long line of moorland ridge, the same horizon. Your father used to say that you could always tell where you were in Yorkshire by the shape of the horizon. The moors to the north and west, different from any other sky. The way they hold the light in the late afternoon, a warmth to them even in winter, the last of the day's sun catching the heather and the grass. You stand at the window and look at that. William comes and stands beside you. He's leaving in March. His 2 years are done in March, and he has a cousin in Halifax who's promised him work at a cloth mill. Not the work he'd have chosen. He wanted to be a teacher, he's told you, he has the head for it. But work. Out. Last day of the year, he says. Yes. Next year better than this one for preference. For preference, you agree. The hills hold their light for another few minutes. Then the cloud closes and the grey comes back and it's just the sky and the stone wall and the cold. You go into supper. Bread. Broth. The broth is thicker now, has been since September, and tonight it has enough turnip in it to taste of something specific and real. You eat it slowly. January 7th, 1847. Your Uncle Robert is a small man with your father's nose and a manner that is precise and careful, in the way that people who have been careful with small resources for a long time are careful with everything. He has walked from the railway station. He wears a good coat, not new, but maintained with the specificity of someone who understands that clothing is an investment and repairs it accordingly. He stands in the entrance yard and you look at each other. The last time you saw him was your father's funeral. Before that, perhaps 3 years. He was someone at the edges of your life, your father's quieter, less robust younger brother. The one who went to Bradford and learned a trade with mink and type instead of cloth. Thomas, he says. Uncle. He looks at your hands. You've been working hard, he says. Yes. He nods. Exactly the same quality of nod your father had. The one that means I see you, I understand, this is noted. Your chest does something unexpected at it. The discharge process takes 2 hours. Forms. The ledger entry closed. Your belongings returned from safekeeping. The Bible, the comb, the spare shirt and stockings. Your own clothes, which have been held for nearly a year, and which when you put them on feel strange and thin compared to the fustian uniform, less substantial, more yourself. Your mother comes from the women's wing, Agnes beside her, and Mary, who is 9 now and 4 inches taller than you remembered, and who runs across the entrance yard in a way that the porter observes with an expression of professional disapproval, and then quietly decides not to act on. She hits you at hip level and grabs on. You're so thin, she says into your coat. So are you, you say. I'm not. I've been eating properly. The food here is terrible, Agnes says. She says it with the flat conviction of someone who's been composing this statement for 11 months and has it ready. Your mother says nothing. She stands in the entrance yard and looks at her children, and the only thing on her face is a specific quality of relief that people who have been holding themselves together for a long time allow themselves when they don't have to hold on anymore. Your Uncle Robert has the paperwork. The porter opens the gate. You walk through it. The road outside is muddy with January. The ruts frozen in uneven ridges that catch your feet as you walk. The town is its usual morning business, indifferent to you, indifferent to the fact that you're walking away from the place that has been the world for 11 months. A cart passes. A woman with a basket nods at your mother in the way Yorkshire women nod at each other. A small compact acknowledgement. Mary is holding your hand. She has been holding it since the gate, and she doesn't show any sign of letting go, and you don't show any sign of wanting her to. Your uncle sets a pace toward the station. You walk. The air is cold and smells of January mud and coal smoke and faintly from somewhere ahead. Bread baking. You breathe it all in. We should talk about what the workhouse does to you. Not while you're in it. That you know. That you've been living. But after. In the years after. The way it lodges in you. Because this is the thing about a place like that. A place built around the systematic management of bare sufficiency. The things it instills in you are not dramatic. They're not the things you'd expect from 11 months of deprivation and institutional control and the particular daily grind of grey fustian and bone dust and gruel. They're quieter than that. You never again waste bread. This is not a decision you make. It just happens. Bread left on a plate creates a response in your body that bypasses your thinking mind entirely, a tightening behind your ribs, an involuntary attention. You eat it. You always eat it. You eat every bit. You hold your bowl in both hands when the food is warm. To warm your hands. You do this at 40, at 60, in houses with fireplaces and with food on the table, and no reason on earth to need your bowl for warmth. You do it anyway. The smell of oatmeal cooking has a specific effect on you. Not bad, not exactly. Just immediate. Just precise. It's a key that opens a room you normally keep closed, and you can look into it for a moment before you close it again. The room contains the rising bell, and the darkness and the particular cold of that ward in February. You can walk through a crowd without difficulty. This you learned in the workhouse yard, in the corridors, in the dining hall. how to move efficiently through close-packed bodies, how to navigate without friction. You never take an easy warmth for granted. A fire, a blanket, a summer sun. These are things you notice consciously as specific gifts for the rest of your life. Other people sit by a fire and think about whatever they're thinking about. You sit by a fire and think about the fire. And the soup. You never eat soup without some awareness of what soup can be, what it can contain, the gap between what is presented and what is present. This is not a comfortable knowledge, but it's useful. The ability to look at what you're being given and ask, gently, without drama, but clearly, what this actually is and where it came from. Caleb Sykes showed you that. The complaint, properly made, the slight improvement that followed. It wasn't much. It was something. Sometimes something is the only thing left, and you say it and see what happens. Your uncle's rooms are in a terrace near the printing works, 2 rooms and a kitchen, which is not large for 5 people but is warm and private, and contains no one whose name is posted on a board. The first morning your mother makes porridge. Real porridge, with milk, from a pan on the small stove in the kitchen, stirred properly with a wooden spoon until it's thick and smooth. She puts it in bowls and sets them on the table, and you sit down together, the 4 of you and your uncle, and there's a moment before you start eating where nobody says anything. Your uncle bows his head. "Thank you," he says. Simply. You eat the porridge. It is warm and smooth, and tastes of milk and oatmeal, and something else that you understand precisely is the taste of sitting at a table with your family in a room you're allowed to be in, eating food that was made for you specifically, by hands that know you. It tastes like that. Mary has put too much sugar on hers and is perfectly happy about this. Agnes is eating with her eyes half closed in a way that suggests she has been thinking about proper porridge for 11 months, and the reality is meeting her expectations. Your mother is eating slowly, watching all 3 of you with an expression that is too full to be readable. You hold your bowl in both hands. The bowl is warm, but that's January 1847, and January 1847 is months away. Tonight is still December. Tonight you're in the ward, the grey walls, the single blanket, Andrew Gill's new presence in the bed where Thomas Pemberton used to cough. William Holt sleeping on the other side of the room with his face turned toward the wall. 6 days. You lie on the straw mattress and look at the ceiling, which you know in the dark by now the way you know your own hand. The beam above your head, the rough whitewash, the small water stain in the corner that looks like nothing in particular. Your body is tired. The boneyard takes something from you every day and gives it back only partially overnight, and the cold makes the giving back less efficient, and 11 months of that quality of sleep accumulates in the body, the way debt accumulates in a ledger. You carry it in your muscles. But tonight, something is lighter. 6 days. Outside, the workhouse is settling into its night sounds. The building shifts slightly in the cold, the way old buildings do. Small creaks and adjustments of stone and wood that you've heard so many times they've become part of the air of the place, part of its specific dark voice. The yard is silent. The town beyond the wall is the muffled industry of a winter night, distant carts and voices and the persistent smell of coal. Somewhere in the building, on the other side of the wall you can't cross, your mother is also lying in the dark. Mary beside her, Agnes in the girls' ward asleep in the way Agnes sleeps. Efficiently, done with the day. They are well. They have been well this whole time. You've been keeping them in a small internal space, a kind of held closeness that doesn't require active thought, just the constant low background knowledge of their presence. The way you keep a candle flame against a wind, not by grabbing at it, just by cupping your hand around it, blocking the draft. That, the ceiling above you is dark. Your body is making its slow descent. The muscle tiredness that has been a constant since February is doing its nightly work, pulling you down below the day's residue, the bone dust and the cold and the taste of the broth, and the image of your mother's face at the meeting. The hills above Marsden, which you'll see again from a different angle in 6 days when the train takes you through the valley on the way to Bradford, and which will look different from how you remembered them, both exactly right and subtly changed, the way everything looks when you've been away long enough. Your father's tilt of his head, that, the curlew. In the morning the rising bell will come at 5:30 and the darkness will be complete, and Andrew Gill will make a sound on his side of the room that means he's waking, and you'll dress in the cold and go down to morning prayers and eat your gruel from the tin bowl held in both hands. 5 more mornings, 4 more Tuesdays. No, 3. 3 Tuesdays. You count them automatically. 3 Tuesdays of broth that is better than it was, but still what it is. Then January. Then your uncle. Then the gate. You've learned some things in this place. You've learned that your hands can do more than you thought. That pain is a threshold, and beyond the threshold is a callus, and the callus is a kind of knowledge, hard and specific and earned. You've learned that warmth, when it comes, is not ordinary. That food, when there's enough of it, is not nothing. That a bowl of proper porridge at a table with your family in a room you chose to be in is not a small thing and should not be treated as one. You've learned that institutions are made of people, and that people within them can be cruel from indifference and can also be decent from the same quality, and that sometimes the space between those two things is a formal complaint made carefully to the right body, and sometimes it's a piece of bread set on the rim of a copper pot by a woman who is doing her best in an impossible kitchen. You've learned to say your own name to yourself at night, when the timetable and the numbers and the institutional machinery have been running all day, and there is a risk of becoming, gradually, only the machinery's object rather than a person who is being processed by it. Thomas Hartley, Marsden, son of William Hartley, brother of Agnes and Mary, 15 years old when the gate closed, 16 when the gate opens. You say it to yourself tonight, Thomas Hartley. Still here, sleep is coming. You can feel the approach of it the way you can feel the approach of a larger weather pattern. First, the quality of the air changes, then the edges of things soften, then there's a loosening in the body that starts at the shoulders and moves down. The room is dark. The ward is quiet. Andrew Gill's breathing already found its sleeping pattern, slow and even. The last of the distant town sounds coming through the walls. A dog, briefly. A cart. Someone's voice raised in something that might be laughter. The world is small right now. This room, these walls, the warm from your body blanket, the straw mattress that you've shaped slightly over 11 months. Not enough to be comfortable exactly, but enough to be familiar, which is its own kind of comfort. 6 days. 6 more mornings of this ceiling. Let it come. Let the dark do its work. Let the day's account close. The boneyard, the copper, the gruel, the timetable, the grey uniform, the grey walls, the grey sky in November above the grey stone. All of it real, all of it lived, all of it yours now, in the way that difficult things become yours. Not because you wanted them, but because you carried them long enough that they took your shape. Your hands in the dark on top of the blanket. These hands. 15 years old, and already these hands. Cracked and calloused and cold at the fingertips, and entirely capable. Entirely yours. Your father would recognize them. He would. The town beyond the wall is very quiet now. The cold has settled into the air with its particular winter weight. The kind of cold that presses everything flat and still. The streets empty, the fires banked, every living thing gathered into whatever warmth it can find. Inside the ward the only sound is breath. 5 men. 6. The rhythm of sleeping people. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyelids is the same darkness as the room, and then it deepens, becomes the particular private darkness of the mind going still, and in that darkness the last thing you see before it closes entirely is the hills, brown and grey in winter, snow on the tops, the line of them against the sky, which is the sky you've always known, the Yorkshire sky, enormous and indifferent and entirely familiar. The hills are still there. They were there before you came in, and they'll be there when you leave, and they'll be there after everything. The long horizontal certainty of the moors against the horizon, the same view from every high window for 100 miles. You know this. It helps. Let the warmth of the blanket be enough. It is enough. Let the tiredness be allowed to be tiredness, the body's honest account of what it has done. It has done enough. Let the 6 days fold themselves in front of you, one by one, as they will. They will pass. They always pass. Let your mother on the other side of the wall be sleeping. She is sleeping. Let Mary be sleeping. Let Agnes be sleeping the way Agnes sleeps. Efficiently. Done. Let the hills be there. They are there. The rising bell will come. It will come at 5:30 into this same dark, and you will get up and you will fold the jacket over the blanket first, for the next man, whoever he is, and you will dress and go down to prayers and eat the gruel from the tin bowl held in both hands. And that is tomorrow, and this is tonight. Warm enough, still enough, close enough to the end of this that the end is no longer abstract. Good enough. Centuries from now, this building will be gone. They will knock down the Yorkshire workhouses one by one across the next 100 years. The poor law will change, and then change again, and then something else will be built in place of the system that built this place. Imperfect, also imperfect, but built on different principles. Built on the idea, at least, that people in need are owed something that looks more like dignity than deterrence. The stone will be repurposed. The yard will be a car park, perhaps. A housing estate. A council office with efficient strip lighting and a coffee machine in the break room. The memory of it will become history. History that people read, that they write about, that they teach in schools as a lesson, in what can happen when you let the principle of less eligibility run its logic out to its end, when you make suffering the mechanism of your social policy and call it reform. But right now, tonight, December 31st, 1846, it is not yet history. It is the wall, the blanket, the cold, the 6 days, and you. Thomas Hartley, son of William, aged 16 in 3 months, boy from Marsden who became something harder in Yorkshire stone and bone dust and thin, Tuesday soup, something that doesn't know yet how hard it is because it's still becoming. You will get out. You will take your mother's porridge at a small table in Bradford in early January, and you will hold the bowl in both hands to warm them, and your sister will have too much sugar on hers and the steam will rise from the bowl in the morning light, and it will be the best breakfast of your life, and you will know that it is even as you eat it, which is a gift most people don't get. The ability to fully inhabit the good thing while it's happening. You will hold that. You will hold it for years. Sleep now. The day is done. The count is running. The days are folding one by one. Let the breath slow. Let the hands unclench. Let the darkness do its good and necessary work. The hills are still there, and so are you. Good night.